everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Beyond the Alert. Today I'm speaking with Andrew AJ Jarrett, Director of Cyber Monitoring and Incident Response at DTCC. AJ, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ann.
Especially for Friday. Really appreciate you being here. I'm sure you've been absolutely swamped with recent travel to Vegas.
Yeah. Well, Friday's a great time to talk about security. You get to slow down, hopefully, a little bit, and it's fun to be able to sit and talk and not be inundated with alerts.
Likewise, it's the most fun part of my week. All right, let's dive in. So you've spent years as a firefighter before moving into cyber. When you're responding to a major security incident at 2 a.m., what firefighting principles do you rely on?
Oh man, that's a great question. First and foremost, I think one nice thing that gave me is perspective. When we're dealing with a security incident, I can remind myself that the building's not on fire and nobody's dying, which allows you to calm down a little bit and focus on what's going on. But on my team, we actually use principles of the incident command system, which is what firefighters and police officers and other emergency response folks in the United States use to coordinate. So the way we bring in other teams and within our company and things like that, we use some of those principles to organize, to set objectives, and to really get everybody on the same page very quickly. So when that 2 a.m. call happens, we can very quickly orient everybody to this is what's going on, this is what we need to do about it, here's why you're here, et cetera.
That's great. So you really have a thorough process and you didn't have to reinvent the wheel either.
I like to say that, it's so easy, even a firefighter could do it. So us tech folks should be able to implement it really easily.
That's being very modest about everything firefighters do. So walk us through your framework for incident response. How does thinking like a firefighter change the way you approach a security incident compared to traditional IR methodologies?
I would say that a lot of folks in the IR world are gonna find the principles that we use, fairly similar. There's been a lot of studies on this. Sands talked about it a long, long time ago. Again, the idea of the incident command system. So, establishing an incident commander, establishing certain key roles within the organization during the incident, and then following principles like management by objectives. So rather than just jumping in, you want to stop for a second. You want to appoint an incident commander. You want that incident commander to sit down and write some objectives. So when we're early on in the incident response process, the objectives are around understanding the scope of the incident. And then as we understand the scope, then those objectives shift towards containment, eradication, recovery. By going through that process and then briefing it out to everyone who's involved, we keep everybody on the same page. And then the other big thing that the emergency management world has is, a plans section. So the idea is you have someone who is writing down those objectives, keeping track of who's doing what, keeping track of that documentation, things like that. So we use incident command system position called a documentation unit leader, whose job it is to gather all the logs, make sure the case records are all updated, bring it all together. And then they're going to lead a lot of the reporting after the incident's over. We also have a what we call situation unit leader. So same concept. It's somebody who is looking at what's going on, keeping track of what has been done and what is currently in process so that as we divide and conquer, because if you get into a really complicated incident, you're going to need to spin different people off on different things. That person can provide situational awareness to the entire group by, receiving those updates in and then disseminating them back out. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, but it's not real different than the way, a lot of folks operate. We still drive to containment. Our goal is when something happens, as quickly as possible, understand the scope and then get into that containment phase as quickly as we can so that we can prevent action on our objectives.
Interesting. And what's standing out to me here is that you have a really process detail oriented approach so that everyone knows what their marching orders are before an incident happens. So hopefully, or one would anticipate that would be less panic when something happens.
We practice it a lot. We try to find opportunities as often as possible to put different people into these various roles, especially our junior folks. I mean, if you join my team, you will find yourself an incident commander on an exercise pretty quick because we want everyone to understand, even if they're not going to be that role when it happens, need them to understand what is the incident commander worried about? What does the incident commander have to deal with, as well as these other roles? That's huge. And so we practice a ton. We do 4 tabletops a year and 4 functional exercises a year. We also do some ad hoc things. Everybody gets some opportunities to work through this as much as we can. so that it's muscle memory. You just execute. And the big thing is we use one framework for all incidents. So whatever the tactics of the particular incident are, whatever we're dealing with, doesn't really matter from the incident commander perspective. We're going to follow a very similar workflow. We just may execute specific tactical playbooks.
So when you're underwater with alerts and incidents, what does your process look like for triaging what matters versus what can wait?
Well, that's again where the firefighter EMT in me comes in really handy because, triage is part of the game. I mean, the one thing I will say is that preparation helps a lot. So one of the big things that we did when I first came to my current role with our team was we went on a tuning crusade to get our signal to noise ratio way, 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 way down. So that we're not drowning in irrelevant and unrelated alerts when an incident occurs. So I will say that preparedness is going to help you tenfold when there's a major incident, right? If your volume through your SOC is not thousands of tickets a day, and then an incident pops off, you can more easily spin resources out to focus on the incident versus work the queue. But no matter what, we have somebody who is always keeping an eye on the queue and then, triaging based on criticality. And we typically don't put a junior person in that role. We actually put a senior person in that role because they're going to have a better understanding of being able to quickly look at a ticket, get a sense for this is something we need to deal with right now or no, it's not. So again, that all goes back to pre-planning and preparation. You have to have your signal to noise ratio down as low as possible. You have to have enough senior people that you can dedicate one to the queue, even when, it's all hands on deck on an incident.
So it sounds like you have to have a really happy team that likes being where it is, right? So you have the retainment of those senior folks while also being able to train more junior ones.
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak for the team. I hope that they're happy. We tend to have a good time. We're a work hard, play hard type of group.
You have to with the work hours.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very fortunate in that we have a lot of leadership support in terms of staffing out the way we need to be and what have you. The other thing too, like I said, is that first step when I first got here was tune, get the volume down to a manageable level so that people are not drowning in tickets their entire shift. That helps break up the monotony. It helps make the burnout a little bit better, and definitely helps in retainment.
How long does it take on average to get to a level where you've reduced a lot of that noise and have tuned?
I would say it's still an ongoing process. I think we got to the point where we were happy with where we were at. It took about 6 months.
Wow. It's not a set it and forget it, like you're saying, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we went from a backlog of thousands of tickets to, cleaning the queue out every day. I think we got to that point about 9 months in, where we were consistently closing the queue all the way out at shift change for each shift. And we've maintained that ever since for the most part. I mean, there's some days where obviously things happen and, new piece of content gets deployed and it goes haywire and it is what it is. But for the most part, we try to obsessively work on keeping that queue as clean as possible so that work does not balloon and get unmanageable really quick because it can. And then you're playing catch up.
So on the note of hires and training, you've managed SOC teams for over a decade. When you interview someone, how do you know or what are the best indicators? Because you don't really know until someone shows up and you see them performing in various environments, whether it's, an investigation into true threat or just day-to-day work. How do you know and assess in that interview if somebody can handle the pressure, especially if an incident occurs?
I'm gonna reveal some tradecraft here, so if anybody ends up applying for a job with us, they're gonna get some insider information in terms of the way I operate. But I let my team ask the technical questions, and then if I'm interviewing someone, I usually do the second round. And what I'm asking is gonna be more soft skill questions. We also use a tool. We have a cyber range that we pay for that allows us to send people like little hour-long tech assessments as well. Once you've demonstrated some basic competency on the tech, I'm much, much, much more interested in the soft skills. One of the big things that I look for someone who's gonna be able to handle a SOC is what are you doing outside of work? And I don't mean from I need to know all the details of your personal life, but do you have something that you do to de-stress? Do you have a hobby? You know, oh, I go home and I study more cybersecurity. Okay, hey, calm down. That's that's great. you are going to burn out so fast. You need analog hobbies. You need to disconnect. So I look to see, does this person have some hobbies? Do they have a support system that allows them to de-stress? I ask a lot of questions around ethics. Tell me about a time that caused an ethical dilemma for you. And I ask them follow-up questions around that because I want to know, are you going to make the right decision at the end of the day? Doesn't matter if the outcome was right or wrong as much as did you follow, your moral compass, because we can work around the rest. The other big thing is I ask people, what's the riskiest decision you've ever made to see, have you ever been put into a situation where you've been under some pressure? And it depends on the level of the role, right? A team lead versus a brand new analyst. I'm not going to expect a brand new analyst who's, in their early 20s to have done a whole lot of crazy things in terms of risky decisions or anything like that. But, I'm looking for appropriate level answers to show, hey, have you made some tough decisions? Are you ethical? Are you going to make ethical decisions when I'm not watching and my managers are not watching? Because above all else, that's what I care about. And then, do you have some sort of support system to make sure that you can deal with stress because this job does get stressful?
Love the approach. And it's something you pointed out, two things that are really interesting for me. So the first one is, what are you doing outside of work? And do you have a support system? So many founders, at least in the startup world that I've been in my entire career, say, well, you're expected to work crazy hours, especially once you hit director and above, right? That's just the expectation. It's a startup. What else would you be doing? You need to put the hours in. But number one, the hours don't translate to effectiveness, number one. Number two, sure, but you'll get burned out, right? And so many founders do get burned out. They burn the midnight oil, they work till 3 a.m. their time, they're answering emails, and you can see the emails and the asks get weirder and weirder as they lose more and more sleep. I think a Harvard study said that, after 2 days of no sleep, you have the decision making ability of a drunk.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's a really important thing, especially in the IR world. We have to be ready to respond and we have to make tough split second decisions with incomplete information, sometimes at crazy hours. And that's where, you know, so a good work life balance is super important for that being sustainable. Otherwise, you're not going to last very long in the SOC. That's why we have three different shifts and they're geolocated in places where my evening shift is working during the day in the location they're in the world. Try not to make people work nights. As a former firefighter and EMT riding on the ambulance and everything else, I can tell you that working 24-hour shifts will absolutely mess you up depending on, how it's going. And a lot of people, it's not sustainable.
But so many founders don't realize that, which is incredible to me. You have that figured out and they don't. They're like, yeah, work yourself to death. That's what we expect.
Don't get me wrong. I did a startup for a while. I ran a startup and I was one of those crazy founders that went all in and everything else. And I figured out pretty quick after my first ulcer in my late 20s, I was like, okay, I'm doing something wrong here. So really it's my focus on my team now is all about sustainability. I don't want to burn anybody out. It's just a job, and it's really about making sure that we staff appropriately and build our processes appropriately so it's sustainable because we want people to make the best decisions when there is an incident. And the only way we can do that is to keep them from burning out.
And it creates longevity, right? Because otherwise in 6 months they're out the door and gone and then they have the same problem in the next company and it's a no-win situation.
Yeah, and it could be rough. I mean, the stock world is very churn and burn, especially depends on what industry you're in and everything else. Like I said, we're very fortunate because of the nature of what my company does. We're very cyber risk adverse, and there's a lot of investment in making sure that we have everything that we need. Not everybody's in that position. Not every industry has got the drivers that mine does that require us to have, staffing at a certain level and things like that. So I will say I'm a little spoiled. It's easy for me to sit up in my ivory tower and say, yeah, you should have, a global team and you should have people in time zones throughout the world where they can work during the day and pass off to each other. Not everybody has those resources, and I get that. At the same time, for founders especially, you need to realize that, sustainability is key. If you burn everybody out, they're going to make bad decisions. You're going to have an incident, and then somebody's going to make a judgment call, and they're going to make a bad judgment call because they're stressed out, they haven't slept, whatever, and they don't have backup. And then that's when things can get really, really bad in terms of incident response and having outcomes you don't want to have.
Yeah. The other thing that you brought up that's super interesting is you said the ethics. And that's again, that's something where AI, if you have an AI SOC analyst, for example, you can't test the ethics, right?
Not easily.
And granted, they're set out to do one thing right now successfully, but that's really interesting because that's the element that AI can't ever replace, same as what's happening in an emergency situation. You need people who can think on the fly, you can stay calm, cool, and collected. So good to have a full view instead of just focusing on bits and pieces where then when incident happens, things break, right? So what is the biggest mistake that you see security leaders make when they're building out their SOC team structure?
There's a lot of ways to do it. I think the biggest mistake that I see a lot of organizations make is focusing so much on the technology and sort of losing out on the people. The most important thing that I have on my team is I have some managers and team leads that are awesome, absolutely killer, highly technically competent, but also just really, really good leads, know how to lead others, know how to teach others, and things like that. If you're going to build a team from scratch, you could go out and buy all the tools in the world. You could have the best SIM, the best EDR, the best NDR, AI enabled this, that, or the other thing. But if you don't have some ringers in leadership position, that team's still not going to be successful. That SOC is still not going to be doing what you want. The other thing too is not really setting direction for the SOC to say, oh, well, just, monitor and tell us what's going on. That you really need to have good metrics. You need to have good goals. You need to be able to judge where you're at and where you want to be and chart a course on how to get there. Again, it's not all about buying tools. You can buy all the tools in the world, but if you don't have the right people, you don't have the right processes, it's not going to work. It's really a three-legged stool, people, process, and technology. A lot of companies know how to fix the technology problem, but not the other two.
So what advice would you give someone who doesn't know how to fix the people component of where to start?
Start with the basics, honestly. Does every position on your SOC team have a job description? Do you have some basic principles for your team? So, like, when I came in to my current role, we didn't have good job descriptions and we had no expectations. And the first thing I heard as I was meeting with the folks on the team was, "I don't even know what the expectations are, but I'm being told I don't meet expectations." All right, cool. Let's solve that problem. So together as a team, we started off with some basic principles, be ethical, make honest mistakes, always be learning, things like that, and we set those as kind of our guiding principles. Then we wrote specific job descriptions for each level, the junior level analyst, the mid-tier analyst, the senior analyst, the team lead, the manager, the director. I let the team draft my job description as well so that everybody understood these are the expectations. These are expectations for the level you're at. These are the expectations for the next level. So when you want to have a conversation about promotion, this is how we're gonna talk about that. And then just be zealously enforcing those expectations. You do that and you will fix the people problem over time because the people who get it and want to be there will go, great, now I have a blueprint. I know what's expected of me and I can move forward. And the people who don't want to be there, it's going to be really obvious after some time that it's not a good fit.
That's a good approach because people can kind of self-select which bucket they fit into, and at the same time, by having your team write your job description, you show how collaborative you are, right? And that it's really the power is in the team.
Well, and I want them to understand and hold everyone accountable. I tell my team all the time that not I'm not always going to be right. I want you to challenge me when I'm incorrect. And so part of that is telling them these are the expectations for me. And if I'm not meeting them, then I want to hear about it.
Which creates a lot of transparency as well, right? Because you're leading by example.
Yeah. I mean, which is what we absolutely should be doing from a security perspective. Just to opine on that a little bit more. I mean, I would say a big problem that we have in tech in general, security is not unique to this, really in tech in general, is we make people managers for being really, really great technical experts. We take really, really smart engineers and then we put them in charge of a team and we say, okay, cool. You're really great at what you do. Let's give you a bunch of people and see if you can increase your impact. But it's a completely different mindset and skill set people management versus, yeah, technical. And so we have a lot of problems where we promote people into leadership roles because we want to retain them. We want to pay them more money so they don't leave. And a lot of times the only way to do that is put them into a people management role. But if you don't do any development in that area, if you don't learn how to be a people manager, you're not going to be successful. And so we have I mean, throughout my career, I've seen some really great people managers, but I've seen a lot of really bad people managers, probably more bad than good. It's a problem all organizations have. I'm not going to say anybody. I haven't seen anyone, solve that with a silver bullet. It's really all about putting in a lot of work and training and development and teaching people how to be people managers.
And care about your people, right? And understand them and what motivates them as well.
Absolutely.
Finding that a lot in the startup world as well, where you have brilliant founders who become first time CEOs and business leaders, and they struggle, but they're not willing to admit it and get a coach. And it's so hard because they could really excel if they just had a little bit of help, and especially the external validation versus someone internal saying, "Hey, here are some tips," right? We refuse to do it. And then a year and a half later, certain things are falling apart and they're racking their brain. Why are the deals disappearing? What's going on? And it's the basics.
Yeah. Everybody I talk to, similar experiences. And yeah, we have a big problem in tech where we move so quick that we kind of forget to develop everybody along the way sometimes. And that's where mentorship and training is so important. And if you're not getting that training in your current job, guess what? There's a lot of books and other resources out there to start learning.
AI deep research
Yeah.
to some degree, better than nothing. But that's exactly it. I feel it's a shortcoming where people just don't invest in that area and it would excel in not just their careers, but also their teams and make it so much better.
The problem you have is that you've been reinforced throughout your career as you climb the ladder that, hey, doing this is how I got promoted. Doing this is, up until a certain level. And then you hit that people manager spot. And suddenly everything that you've done leading up to that is no longer relevant in making you successful to move to the next level in people management. And you have to basically reteach yourself. Some organizations, I was very fortunate earlier on in my career to work for an organization that trained all people managers before you were allowed to have direct reports. You had to go through a training program, and I credit that for making me a lot better people manager than I would be otherwise. But if you don't have that, go find resources. There's lots of books on this topic. After you've read a few of them, you start realizing that yeah, it's the same fundamental principles over and over and over again. But some people don't get tapped on the shoulder and get told that, like, "Hey, you have to change the way you think, when you hit that role."
Or they may not be open to it for a while until at some point they start seeing the issues and say, all right, I think it's time.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
Tough way to learn, not so great for your team. For those managers who might be struggling on that front or leaders, there's probably burnout. They may not have the luxury of you having a more fleshed out team. What would be early warning signs to watch for in your team members if you are the kind of organization or culture that burns out people?
You're gonna start seeing a lot of dumb mistakes, what you think are dumb mistakes that the team's making where, you put them under pressure and they don't perform well. There's the old saying, "People don't rise to the occasion, they fall to their level of training." When you're burned out, you're degraded, and so you put a burned out person under stress, and they're not gonna perform as well as you want them to. Another sign is gonna be they're not talking to you, frankly, you know? They're receiving, but it's not a conversation anymore. They're just receiving orders and saying, "Got it," and that's it. There's no discussion, there's no, "Hey, I have an idea." That's a big danger sign that as a manager, you're probably not doing what you need to be doing, and they don't feel comfortable having those conversations. And if none of your directs have ever pulled you aside and gone, "Hey, I don't agree with the decision you just made. Can we talk about it?" If you've never had that conversation with anyone who reports to you, be very cognizant of the fact that there's probably a reason and it's not because you're perfect. And then when you get into the later stages, you're gonna see apathy. You're gonna want your team to take the initiative and they're not gonna consistently. I've come into teams before where there's team meetings and most of the team doesn't even attend them, stuff like that.
So they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed or they've gotten to the point now where they don't care and, you know, yeah, they've quiet quit and they're done.
And at that point, it's almost too late, right? Unless you have a real heart to heart. But then once you're burned out, the recovery takes so much longer than just making sure you have a better work life balance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and even if you have a heart to heart, you can really only do that once and retain that person. If you burn them out again, they're done. They're done, done. They won't come back. And honestly, in some cases, if that's the experience that somebody's had, leaving the organization and going to a new one, maybe the wipe that they need really to be better. Even if you change leadership out and everything else, if you have people who are too far gone, sometimes it's, hey, you know, we get it. This place has created an environment that you're not going to excel in. Let's be done.
But I think that's also a really good point to bring up, right? Recognize when you're past that point and there is no returning.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the idea of giving up on anyone, but at the same time, sometimes it's better for everybody. But, really you wanna find the early signs of burnout and the early signs of stress, and you wanna start addressing those. And, I don't mean with a pizza party. Team building's great, but part of it too is just finding ways to break up the monotony and get people out of things. So give out some projects, rotate some duties around, get people out of the monotony of the day to day and let them do some stuff. The other big thing that I'm big about is PTO stands for prepare the others. So when someone on our team goes on PTO, their job before they go out is to ensure that whatever tasks they have get delegated to somebody else so that they can enjoy their PTO.
I love that. I've never heard that, but I'm going to borrow that if that's okay with you.
Please, please. I don't remember who I got it from, but I mean, ever since I heard it, I'm like, that's exactly what it should be.
It's great. Win-win. So, you teach cyber at Texas A&M. What's the biggest gap you see between what students are learning in the classroom versus what they need in day 1 in the SOC?
Academia is doing their very best to address the cyber talent gap, right? I mean, we've got a lot of programs that have spun up over the last 5, 10 years to teach cybersecurity. I will say that a lot of the academic cybersecurity is very theory, book learning, certifications. Great, great foundation.
Regardless of what you study, it's inevitably the case.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but with cyber, because things are moving so fast, the gulf is just huge. So it's one of those things where, a new grad in cyber has usually got a few certifications, they've got some foundation, but they have no practical application of any of that knowledge. That's the biggest thing is that apprenticeship, I think is what is missing out of the academic approach to cyber education right now. I hate to say it, but cybersecurity professionals are probably more like plumbers than they are like lawyers. You need to apprentice for a certain amount of time and learn how to apply the knowledge before you can go off and do anything. 5 years is kind of the magic amount of time where after you've graduated or however you got into the industry, after about 5 years, suddenly your opportunities get way, 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 way bigger because you now know how to apply all that knowledge. I'm probably making a mistake here in that I'm talking about academia as like one big pillar. There are different approaches at different institutions. Some are a lot more hands-on than others. But my biggest advice to anyone in academia who's trying to create cyber workforce for people like me to hire is the more practical opportunities that the students can have, the better. Hands-on is always good. If there's opportunities for these people to apprentice, if you're a university and you have a SOC, let your cybersecurity students apprentice at the SOC. One, it's a cheap source of labor. Two, they come out with a bunch of practical knowledge when they graduate.
And they know do they like the space, right? And what it truly requires versus just what you're reading in your textbooks.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not going to say that certifications or degrees are bad. They're not. I mean, it shows you understand the foundations, the basics. It's a great thing to build upon. But yeah, the big thing that we need in the industry is we need that practical application of the knowledge because how you apply that knowledge is constantly changing and morphing as the threat actors change, and we get the new technologies. So,
Changes too quickly to update curriculums and get those approved and all of that as well.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have courses that are on, 5-year update cycles and things like that, and it's like, yeah, I mean,
Dinosaur age for cyber.
yeah, exactly. 6 months from now, it's gonna be slightly different, to some degree. There are definitely some commonalities that have existed since the beginning, but
So I have to ask this coming from an AI native company that I work for. With a lot of times the saying goes, hey, if you have an AI SOC analyst, you can use that to coach your junior folks. I would love to hear your honest thoughts on that statement.
I will say that my experience with AI analysts is I would not necessarily allow an AI analyst to coach my junior SOC members without some oversight.
That's a given. Human in the loop. At this current state of AI, for sure.
And really, that's where having like a good QA program is really important anyway, because you can catch those things both when an analyst or an AI agent makes a mistake. But I would be a little nervous on that depending on the use case. There's definitely some places where AI agents are excelling. One of them is like phishing email analysis. That's awesome. An LLM that could be used to create a phishing email is also really good at detecting phishing emails. Surprise, surprise. At the same time, AI analysts, in my experience, have come back with some pretty crazy recommendations sometimes. And if you give those recommendations directly to a junior team member who doesn't have the knowledge and experience to go, hey, that's a little out there. I shouldn't do that. Bad things can happen.
Because they don't know what good looks like yet, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so the problem you got is you have to have a well-trained, really mature onboarded model. So you have to have onboarded the model quite a while ago, spend a lot of time with your senior team members training the model so that it works correctly, and then you can let your junior team members learn from it. But it really requires a lot of training and growing just like you would a junior analyst, honestly.
So it would basically be useful as one of the training components in swim lanes.
Yep. I would agree with that. And the big thing to remember is AI is encompassing of a lot of things. There's, generative and agentic AI, which are a lot newer, but then there's other AI things out there that have been baked into security for a long, long time. I mean, we've had machine learning baked into EDR and NDR for, 15, 20 years.
And no one almost never talks about it, which is interesting.
I know, I know. It's like, we're setting up like AI governance at my company right now, and they're like, "Yeah, we need to, make sure that every use of AI in our security tools is evaluated." I'm like, "Great, so you need to go back and look at all the ones we already have deployed."
I'm sure you got some interesting expressions when you said that. So let's talk about the political layer. You've worked in large organizations where getting budget and executive buy in is critical. What is your approach when you need to sell a security initiative to someone who doesn't understand the technical details?
The political layer, that's my joke for, layer 8 of the OSI model. It's really important. It's critical as a leader in the space to know how to navigate it, even if you hate doing it like I do.
I think all of us hate the politics in the business, no?
For the most part, I've met some people that I think maybe enjoy it a little too much, but for the most part, I'm a reluctant participant. But it's necessary because you get enough people together, and you're gonna have to sell what you want, what you need. The biggest thing that I found when dealing with non-technical folks is really move away from the technical jargon and start talking in the language of risk. That's gonna be the biggest thing is how can you tie this back to risk? Turn it into a risk management conversation and say, either we need to accept this risk or we need to, implement something like, what I'm asking for here or whatever we're trying to fund and really put it in those terms. So instead of it's I want a new shiny tool, it's we've identified a risk. Either we can accept that risk or we need to dedicate some budget, some time, whatever to solving the risk. That's the first step. The other thing too is you can't be FUD. You can't be fear, uncertainty, doubt all the time. It's really a risk conversation to say, hey, these are the things, and you can't be the sky is falling all the time. It's easy to fall into that trap in the SOC, but you have to stay out of it. And a lot of that has to do with educating your senior leadership, having conversations with them when there's not an incident occurring.
So getting that report built out up front.
Yep, yep. Don't just come to them when you need something or you have bad news. Come to them also about wins, victories, whatever. The other thing too is like my team, we have a 3-year plan. We'll next month bring the team together and we'll spend a few days working on our updated 3-year plan that will be finalized, in December. And I present that to my senior leadership. So a lot of times when I have an ask, it fits into that framework. Hey, these goals that we told you we have, this is the next step in that goal. So by the time we get around to asking, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're trying to do this. You already told me about that. I understand that." But the big thing is you gotta figure out how to explain how does this address risk? How does this enable the business? What have you. You can't just say, "Oh, threat actors use, this TTP and this tool addresses this TTP." The non-technical executives are gonna glaze over. Even some of the technical executives are gonna glaze over. And so you gotta make sure that you're speaking the right language, which is, "Here's the risk. This is how this enables the business. We have a new initiative, and this is what we need to make sure the security can support that initiative," etcetera.
Yep, makes sense. So DTCC sits at the heart of global financial infrastructure. Without getting into too many specifics, how does securing critical financial infrastructure differ from a typical enterprise?
It's been a bit of a learning curve for me. I didn't have a finance background when I came to DTCC, and the big thing that is interesting about DTCC is our regulatory landscape. So not only are we regulated by multiple US regulators, but also a number of global regulators. Now, at the end of the day, most cybersecurity regulations are kind of the same, right? The different regulators may have different names, different frameworks may have different names, but at the end of the day, it's all kind of the same set of controls. We're all trying to get to the same set of goals in terms of what we're protecting against. But learning how to navigate that has been very, very interesting and very, very different. As a result of our position as a systemically important financial market utility, cybersecurity is very, very important to our company, which is great. I would say on the one hand, the regulatory landscape is challenging and requires a lot of learning and attention to detail. On the other hand, I don't have to explain what value I bring to the organization to any executive in the company. They get it. So, there's pros and cons. I will say that anybody who comes into a similar organization, go find your cyber lawyer and spend as much time with them as possible and understand what are all of our requirements, what are all of our regulatory reporting requirements, our compliance requirements. Get all that understanding under your belt as quickly as possible so that you can start operating in that environment. And then once you learn what the rules are, it's pretty easy after that.
Great tip for the audience. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, last really, really tricky one before we jump into the final set. 5 years from now, what do you think will be the most critical skill for SOC analysts and security leaders that most people are not thinking about today?
The obvious one to talk about is AI, right? But I think everyone's thinking about AI. If not, you have not been checking your LinkedIn messages much because honestly, I think 5 years from now, the biggest thing that we're going to have, it's still AI related. I think we're going to have an apprenticeship problem. How do you build a SOC team lead? Well, you take a level 3 SOC analyst and you teach them how to be a team lead. How do you build a level 3 analyst? Well, you take a level 2 analyst and you give them a bunch of experience and knowledge and train them up and teach them how to be a level 3. How do you get a level 2? Well, level 1. There's a lot of people pushing technologies out there and they're saying, "Oh, we're going to do away with level 1." It's like, cool, but I still got to build level 3s. So I think 5 years from now, the thing that we need to focus on as an industry for 5 years from now is making sure that we don't break that apprenticeship program. We don't break that pipeline because I think everyone I've talked to from an AI perspective that's really in it is that's serious about it is saying, it's human in the loop is not going away. So we have to continue to produce humans who can be in the loop. And I think that's going to be a big challenge.
Sounds like with your expertise on the people skill set front in leadership, that's a great startup idea for you.
Could be, could be.
We usually wrap this up with one question the last guest left for you, and then you get to throw out a question for the next guest and throw them a curveball. So the question from the last guest was Eder Ribeiro, Director of Global IR at TransUnion. And his question to you is, what is your philosophy of increasing the pool of knowledge within the entire team when it comes to novel subjects?
That's a fantastic question. The way we approach it is that we have a formal training program. So basically every quarter the training is planned out. We also give the team the opportunity to basically pick specialties that they want to specialize in. So, within our organization, there are some requirements to get up to a certain level to say you have to be an SME in, some technology, some sort of something. So part of it is we let the team talk to the person who runs the training program and actually put that into the backlog when there are novel subjects. We also look at what novel subjects relate to our company's overall goals. One of the things that we're working on right now is, as our company does a lot in the blockchain space, we are going to have to start monitoring blockchain transactions as a SOC. And so the team's learning all about blockchain. Some of them already knew, but the rest are all having to get up to a certain level. We follow a lot of a train the trainer style approach. So we'll make someone an SME, get them advanced training, and then have them give teach backs and classes back to the rest of the team. But at the same time, we're always on the hunt for new exciting things. At the same time, we try to balance that out with, ensuring that we're continuing to touch on the fundamentals.
Food for thought for the next guest. What would you like to throw their way?
I would say, besides AI, what do you think the biggest change to cybersecurity in the next 5 years is going to be?
That's a good one. You've given such outstanding advice and input for anyone looking to get into the space or level up in the space. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew AJ Jarrett, or linkedin.com/cyberaj. And I'm happy to talk with folks. I'm not incredibly into the conference circuit. I probably make a couple a year, but if you ever see me at a conference, I'm always happy to discuss cybersecurity over a frosty beverage and what have you. But I tell people all the time, add me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk. Happy to share notes. We're all on the same team in terms of fighting the bad guys. So,
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, it's a wrap. It's all we have time for today. Unfortunately, I could talk to you all day. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, AJ.
no, thank you for having me in. And absolutely, I could talk all day as well. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.